All right, welcome back to another episode of the podcast, and all the way from Perth, I've got fellow Indian judge and very well respected coach Richard Collins on the episode today, mate. How you going?
Not too bad, man. How are you? Thank
I'm
you for
very
having me
good. I'm
on.
very good.
I've been excited for this one.
Yeah, yeah,
Always,
yeah. We've been teeing up for
always
a
a
while.
good
We
chat
meant
with
to
you.
obviously line one up while we're over in India last, but it just didn't happen. The trips are too short, but
Yeah.
no, it's definitely worth a chat for sure. So I thought, like a lot of people didn't are aware who you are, but at the same time, there's probably plenty on this episode that don't. So would you mind giving us a quick background, how you got into physique coaching and bodybuilding in general? And I know you're heavily involved in other sports as well. So if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So originally, I didn't start through the traditional way of coaching. I ended up doing a course in or diploma in strength and conditioning
Okay.
in sports development in Melbourne.
Mm,
And I did that because I played quite a high level of basketball growing up.
right.
And then it was sort of my enjoyment was the strength and conditioning side. I wanted to prioritize basketball, learn as much as I could about that because I really enjoyed it. And I did that for a really long time. Worked in the AFL. Got to work quite high up in the basketball. Got to work with NBL players, things like that.
Nice.
And I ended up having one client one time when I was working at a commercial gym that wanted to do a bodybuilding competition. And this is going back like 18 years, 19
Yeah,
years
well.
ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so and we did it. She did really well. I didn't know what I was doing. If I go back and look at what I tried, I probably wouldn't have done it the same way now.
Right.
Um, However, she won. She was successful. And then a couple other people that she knew or from the bodybuilding scene just sort of said, "Hey, I want to do this too. Can you help me?" And I ended up just sort of taking on clients from it. Was really lucky, had some great clients at the start, some really coachable client athletes that were just, without the help of me, were just phenomenal athletes. You know how it is. And then I ended up uh, I just ended up more regularly taking on clients for the sport of bodybuilding, and it just kind of rolled and transitioned from there. And I sort of kept the basketball going, but it ended up financially being a better sort of choice for me to do body composition. So not just necessarily bodybuilding, but just
Mm.
helping people manipulate their body composition, whether it was competitors or general population or whatever it was. And then I started to really enjoy that. Obviously, the way that I learn is more problem solving, hands-on. So when a client has a issue, I'll work out. If I don't know how to resolve it, I'll go learn and try to learn how to resolve it.
Yep.
And I think all those things just kind of led me down the path to coaching body composition, which I still do quite a lot of basketball coaching. I don't do too many of the other sports anymore, but I still privately coach some semi-professional and professional basketball players.
Hmm.
But majority of the business now just is body composition. So whether it's the sport of bodybuilding or whether it's just general people that want to look better, the business has just kind of geared itself that way because business was better in that area. I think
Absolutely.
there's a larger demographic, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
larger demographic of people in the world that want to look better
Mm.
than there is that want to be better at sport, if that makes sense.
And you recently told me we were in India too. You've got a professional wrestler as a client as well. Are we allowed to talk about that?
Oh, yeah, we are a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, so
Can
we
you name
do.
names or no?
We do, yeah. So I do that a little bit, which is cool. That's essentially body composition training.
Sure.
The cool thing about that though is, the skill side of things. Obviously, I have zero idea about. Uh, so they have people to do that, and I'm able to help with body composition in that regard and things like that, which is cool. But yeah, so it's those things are really cool. We're able to work with some really cool people in different areas and aspects of sport. But yeah, it's a blast. It's been an absolute blast the last 20 years. So
Yeah, well.
gonna have an exciting next 20 years as well.
Oh, no doubt, mate. No doubt. So you've obviously judged, you've judged NPC, you've judged some natural feds too. Is that right over here in Australia over the years?
Yeah, yeah, ICN now mostly.
Okay.
Obviously we'll keep the ICN. So yeah, it's It's been really cool. It's been a really long time since I've been able to do that. And going over to India was
Mm.
well, I did Dubai first
To
in
Dubai, yeah.
June, which was really cool. It was a much smaller show, but it was an awesome show. Like it was a great experience. The competitors were amazing. There was people from Europe and India and and Australia coming
Mm.
over and competing. And then yeah, I got to do my first India show. What was it? 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago, somewhere
Yeah,
in
yeah.
there.
December. Yeah. November,
Yeah,
December. Yeah.
with Tran and yourself and Joey and I can't remember the guy's name from the Czech, but he was awesome too. Um, yeah, and just the whole experience, man, it was so fun. Like
Mm.
I think the whole culture of it's so different, and like it was just like a really big eye opener for me, where um, just seeing how differently everything is done there, how the people interact, and just like how the crowd is, and
Yeah.
how the stages are, and how everything runs and everything like that. So even the setups of the stage, which we see probably wouldn't the OHS a little different, and
Mm.
just little things like that were really like it was just such a good experience, and the competitors were. So lovely. I thought, even just messaging after and regardless of whether they want feedback or they were just messaging to say thank you for coming over and, all things that, you and Joey and stuff are used to doing it for a few years, but
Mm.
it was a new experience for me and definitely one that I want to keep doing.
It's a pretty unique experience, isn't it? Because the gratitude of the athlete in particular, there's a lot to be desired about that, and as Australians, we could probably learn a lot as well, given their living environment and conditions, and where they come from, their backgrounds and stuff, and they're so thankful just to have the opportunity. And you see some people, celebrate when they got a fourth place, like that sort of stuff is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it was there. I was telling people when I was coming back here, I'm like, you guys just have to go and see it. Like
Mm.
it's really hard to explain. But just the whole, like I said to Jay, it was like a movie. Like the whole thing was just like insane. And
Mm.
it was just a really fun experience to be a part of and just sort of see how it all works and things like that. And see the different standards of bodybuilding over there and all those sorts of things and how huge it is over there and how passionate they all are and just how it works so differently with like the teams all having the same uniforms and just small things like that just made it like really it was really fun for me. I think it
Yeah.
was that India show was probably one of the most fun times I've ever had at a bodybuilding show.
Wow, there you go. How good. Oh, hopefully there's more to come then.
I hope so as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you're like anyone who follows along to you on the your Instagram is aware that you put up some really resonating quotes.
Thank you.
They're very relevant. They're articulated really well, and they're heavily shared, I would imagine. I know I share quite a lot of them, and because you write them so well that it's no point in trying to repurpose it because there's no way of improving it. So I thought there was an opportunity to sort of something a little bit different to grab a couple of them. I'll read them back to you because me being as disorganized as I was, I didn't actually share them with you originally when we were
No, that's
typing
fine,
this
man.
up. Um, and then we could elaborate on because there's obviously a bit more to it, and there might be a backstory to it too if you
There
remember when
always
you came
is.
up with it. Yeah, there always is. So that's always a good thing. So I'll
Fire
bring
'em
up the
away.
first one. I'll bring it on my other screen here once it opens up,
Yeah,
and
cool, man.
we'll have a chat about it. So the first one, and I really like this one, and that's why it was the first one I picked. Everybody says they want to be held accountable until they're actually held accountable. Being coachable is a skill all athletes need to master if they want to reach their full potential. So particularly that first sentence about everyone wants to be accountable until they're held to account. It's I can resonate with that so strongly. But do you want to elaborate on that from your perspective and where this sort of potentially came from originally?
Yeah, so with a lot of my social media posts, like I'm in a position, and the reason I do these posts, I have to give you this background story
Sure,
before
go
that.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the reasons that like I really enjoy doing these is because I'm one of the few coaches that has the experience in like professional slash elite performance in sport
Mm.
as well as bodybuilding.
Yep.
Or even if we're not talking about bodybuilding, we're just talking about like uh, you know, elitism athletes
Mm.
in general. So I always try to draw comparisons between the two
Okay.
because I think there's a lot that bodybuilding can learn from professional sport.
Mm.
I also think there's a lot that professional sport can learn from bodybuilding
Yep.
in a different regard. But so I have in my head, I always draw comparisons to these two sort of things. And like that post there, the accountability one is I actually went so a lot of my posts I've posted, a few years ago,
Yep.
and then I've enjoyed it. Something's been relevant that I've seen and I've reposted it. The original time for that was just like, there's a big difference between, I think, you see like a professional bodybuilder that maybe hasn't played sport growing up,
Mm.
genetically very gifted in specific federations, that can alone, with a little bit of work, can be enough to become a professional athlete.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
So when I compare that to a sport like AFL, soccer, basketball, something like that, generally those athletes are um, they start from 8 or 9 years old. They have to go through the ups and downs of what sport really is. They learn life lessons, how to win, how to lose, all of those sort of things. Um, and they'll spend, 12 or 15 years where, you don't get to the professional level unless you're coachable,
Mm.
because that you just won't, you can't get better. So the two comparisons that I drew on that were essentially like, there's a lot of people that I found in the bodybuilding world that uh they'll say they want to be coachable, they'll say they want to be pushed, or they say they want to be their best, but they just don't have the experience of what potentially a professional sports player would have, doing the sport for 15 years. And it's no fault of their own. It's just, they maybe haven't played team sports growing up. And then for some people, accountability looks like getting told off,
Mm.
right? And they just don't have the composure or uh, emotional IQ to understand that that's what it is.
Yeah.
And then there's a side to the coaches of this as well, which is a whole other point. But like, so my sort of thing there with that was like, when I look at some of the basketball players that are being worked with, and when I say like when they get held accountable, how they respond to it
Mm.
can be very, very different to how somebody in the physique world can potentially respond to it. And like I said, it's no fault of their own. It's just that they just haven't been exposed to that growing up.
Yep.
So again, that whole post was about, there's lots of people that say that they want that, but when they get it, they look at it as an attack.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is like a huge roadblock for preventing you to get better.
Mm.
And I see, like potentially some with my clients, but just, athletes in general in the bodybuilding world that, I see or speak to, is like there's so much untapped potential that some of these athletes could have if they were not more open to criticism, but, not taking it as an attack and then taking it as okay, cool, this person might be getting on my back, but they're getting on my back because they know I can be my best. And I think that that's like a separation. So that was and again, a draw to that post, because I think, even nowadays, even if it's not competitive athletes,
Mm.
how many, like, as coaches, like, we can be realistic here as coaches, there's a lot of athletes that people will have that, it's very hard to coach them
Yeah.
because the minute you tell them they need to do something better, they either shut off or they become, they're not solution based. They're defending themselves completely. And it's like, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just trying to help you be better. Like it's, I'm not. And again, and I think it was just an observation and a point to make for myself, that it was like, this exists. And a lot of coaches would reply that and be like, I 100% agree with this.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of athletes that'll reply it that'll be like, yeah, look, when I worked this out, that's when I actually got better.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Great point.
But on the other side to it,
Mm.
and I didn't put this in the post because the posts need to be short, but
Yep.
this is also something that I think is probably worth noting on long form content is like at the same time, I think there's also from a coach's point of view, there's coaches that enjoy being the hard ass and think that like maybe they don't have the experience coaching people.
Mm.
Like the same way the athletes don't have the experience dealing with it. But like you can only be tough on someone to the same extent that they know that you care.
Yep.
So, for example, like if I was to coach somebody and I had no relationship with them whatsoever, I just met them and I just rode them constantly, it probably wouldn't be received very well.
Mm.
But if I take the time to build a relationship with the client and understand where they're coming from and things like that, they're going to be much more open to criticism, I think. And I think that, it's a worthy note to make on that, I can't, I'm not just attacking athletes. Like that's it's a thing where it's like, okay, coaches have a responsibility to build a relationship and bond with the client so that they feel trust so that you can be like that. Because if you don't do that, they're not going to feel like that you're in their corner. So I think there's two sides to that, but I think that that was a point that I didn't put into that post that um, is really important as well from an athlete's or from a coach's point of view is to make sure that you're doing that because I don't honestly think you can push a client any harder than they know that you're in their corner.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that's a really good point you bring up about the coaching side because I think from both perspectives in those sort of situations, there's an opportunity to learn, right? So
Yeah.
that the athlete can learn to be better and understand that what the coach is trying to do with the trust involved. And the coach can obviously learn to work better with the client as well. So it's very, very relevant to, well, all professional sports and, elite sports and bodybuilding, as you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's the key to it because there's so many similarities that people just like, generally people just veer towards one.
Mm.
But, the one thing that I always sort of try to explain to people is like, if you're a good coach, you will be able to coach anything that you learn the skills to. Um, whether it's school teachers, whether it's different sports, whether it's bodybuilding, whether it's general public, whatever it is, right? Like coaching is coaching. It's the same thing across the board. Whereas I think that's why I think it's really cool. And I always try to get people that I consider coaches from other industries or different parts of fitness or teachers or fucking parents, all those sort of
Mm.
things. Because it's still coaching.
Yeah.
And there's so much that if you don't look at the specifics, but you look at the underlying values and concepts, like they all overlap. And you can learn so much um, you know, from each other in terms of that, like the way I coach versus the way a soccer coach coaches their group of soccer teams. Or, I always sort of say, and I'll rant or not rant, but I'll go on a little bit about this. But like one thing that I always sort of say is like coaching, like, 10 and 12-year-old kids in a sport.
Mm.
Like if you can do that, you can coach anyone. Like being able to keep them motivated, keep them not being distracted, keep, all that sort of stuff there, keep them having fun, keep them wanting them to come back and play.
Mhm.
You take that, and even though it has nothing to do with coaching and body composition, it's the same concepts, right? That's what you want to do with a new person to the gym. You want to make sure they have fun. You want to make sure they keep coming back, and all those sort of things. So I think it's a really important part of coaching is essentially just athletes needing to want to get better but also the coach has to make them feel excited and motivated to do it. So it's definitely a two-way street, whereas that post was a little bit of a one-way street. But I think it's a definitely a two-way street for that.
Absolutely. It's interesting you bring that up about coaching being, I guess, a sort of an overarching position. A lot of professional teams now have, what they call or deem a manager, and then obviously the technical coaches underneath. Do you feel, and this is a discussion that gets brought up a lot in sporting platforms, particularly across Australia, in that like a rugby union coach could potentially integrate in and become a AFL coach, or a rugby league coach could be, potentially a soccer coach, because as you said, the coaching principles are very similar. It's just a different sport, but they've got those assistants in place. Do you reckon that would be something that we might see? Because I know it's a little bit taboo at times.
maybe not from the skill point of view.
Hmm.
So like within AFL, obviously you'll have like, you'll have the midfield coach, you'll have defensive coach, you'll have forward coach, whatnot. I think maybe not as much with the skill stuff, but I think in terms of, things like culture,
Yeah.
stuff like that, I 100% yes. And it happens quite regularly now. Like I know Damian Martin that was a absolute, he's going to be a Hall of
Okay.
Famer for the
Yeah.
Perth Wildcats.
Yeah.
He's working with the Fremantle Dockers at the moment. So and I don't rugby's not a big thing in WA, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know much with rugby, but I'm sure it's happening because I know it is happening across,
Yep.
multitudes of sports where
Mm.
um the concept, like we said, the concepts are the same. So they're able to bring over things that help with culture and when you're at the professional level, it's less about skills and it's more about, everybody that's there is good. That's why
Yep.
they're there.
Yep.
So it's more about, from a coach's point of view, managing them playing together and bringing out the best of all of their skills concurrently playing. And that's one of the big differences between amateur and professional sport is professional sports don't really do a lot with skills. They're managing high level athletes to, get the most out of them.
Yep.
And I think from that point, having coaches and players that have been really good with that from other sports, there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be able to come over and do that. Like they skill wise, probably not. But again, like actual player management, yeah, I
Yep.
definitely think there's going to be some good merit, at least coming in to help out here and there and have talks with the team and sort of things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, no, I agree with you 100%. And you're right, you do see it a little bit. And I think I follow rugby league quite heavily, and a lot of coaches in their off season will go to like the NFL and
Mhm.
pick the brains out of the coaching staff over there because they obviously see that as a successful platform and want to learn. But you don't know what you don't know. So if you can delve into other areas, you're only going to up your skill set.
And I think all bodybuilding coaches, I always tell people look outside the box when you're coaching for bodybuilding. Like most of my unless I'm learning the hard skills, which is like, sets, reps, whatnot.
Mm.
A lot of my coaching study comes from sports coaches of
Yeah.
other areas, and just learning because a lot of these athletes are amazing. It's just, they want to be there and they want to be their best, but if you just have to learn how to bring it out of them.
Mm. Absolutely.
So
Well,
once you
you go.
yeah, now go on.
I was just going to say it's a good segue into your next quote, but I'll let you finish.
No, I was just going to say it's like, it's I think another reason why my post resonates so well is because
Mm.
I think there's a lot of coaches that are phenomenal with the hard skills. With coaching the X's and O's of bodybuilding, but then there's a large component of making sure we can get the most out of them, which is, yes, you're doing the work, but my job is to light a fire under you so that you do the work, the same work, but you do it at a higher level.
Yep.
And that's going to bring, that's going to bring a very large scale difference to the final product that you bring to stage.
100%, mate. Absolutely. So the next quote obviously sort of tails on from that a little bit, and I'll read it straight from here for you.
Yeah.
Don't enter a car race if you don't know how to drive. Don't enter a marathon if you can't run 5Ks. Don't enter a bodybuilding show if you don't have the ability to stick to diets and training programs. Competitive bodybuilding is like any sport. It's a great goal, but you need to learn how to be a bodybuilder before you do competitive bodybuilding. So obviously there's some other quotes that you've done that sort of identify the fact that a bodybuilding and competitive bodybuilding are different, right? So do
Very.
you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I just like this was a rant. I remember posting. Yeah. So you might get this one. You picked a good one, Paulie. Yeah, look, I think there's in the world of social media now, I think there's like a uh heavy outcome driven like people are very outcome driven
Mm.
and they see something on social media and then they want to do it. They see their friends doing it, they want to do it. It might attract specific amounts of attention or they just like the look of it, which is fine. I have to say that it's 100% more than fine, right? But I think the issue that arises is like bodybuilding, you can train to look better and then you can train to be a competitive bodybuilder.
Hmm.
And the analogies that I've drawn over there, it's like you can go out for a run, but if you have zero chance of being anywhere in ballpark near running 42 kilometers, like don't sit there and go, I'm going to enter a marathon and I want to do it soon.
Mm.
right? Before you learn the skills and how to do it. And then the same thing again on the car one. It's like you can watch the F1 Grand Prix on TV, but if you don't have your L's, like, great long-term goal, but you got to learn how to be a driver
Yeah.
before you can actually race a car. You have to learn how to be a runner before you can actually run. And I think that gets a little bit lost at times with bodybuilding. And I think it's also a case of like people want to do it, they see it on social media. Coaches are trying to, obviously get clients on stage because it looks better for their business and whatnot and things like that. So I think there's like, I just kind of wanted to open up and show to people, it's like, hey guys, like these sound far-fetched, but it's the same shit. You know what I mean? It's like we're if you don't know how to track food or you struggle to stick to a diet or you don't understand the basic concepts of how progressive overload works, or you don't know what's involved in competitive bodybuilding and you're not willing to spend 90% of the year, not looking like you're on stage, 98% of the year not looking like you're on stage, then maybe the sport's not for you.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Maybe you want to look better and stay looking good all year because it makes you feel confident and happy. And that's cool, but that's not competitive bodybuilding.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And it's like that's just getting in shape. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would encourage that to every single person out there to try to, be healthy, look as good as they can, and have themselves be more confident in life. But I think there's a lot of people that kind of don't realize that and don't realize what bodybuilding entails as a competitive sport. And then they get into it, and then emotionally they go through an absolute roller coaster that sometimes people don't recover from. And I just, I see that more and more regularly nowadays, or people getting on stage that shouldn't be on stage.
Yes.
And not necessarily because they don't look the part, maybe a little bit that, but also just that, they maybe comes back to the previous post. They don't know how to be a competitor. They've never done it before, right? Now they're dealing with all these emotional issues of, they were insecure and that's why they wanted to change their physique in the first place. So what have they done? They've gone and almost just busted themselves up to get on stage, to not get a place, and now they feel even worse about themselves. And it's like, now we're dealing with more potential eating disorders, body dysmorphia, all those sort of things. And it's like, if they had just learned what the sport was and took their time and learned the concepts of the sport, then maybe we could have avoided all this.
Yep.
And, maybe they wouldn't get on stage, maybe they would, but they would have a better understanding of what everything entails. And, we would, on the back end of it, we might be able to have somebody that wants to come back and be better and do the sport again, or somebody that uh, now hates the gym and is more insecure about themselves than they've ever been. And I think it's really important that, that message is conveyed to people that, you can't just jump straight on stage. You got to learn how to live as a bodybuilder before you can be a competitive bodybuilder.
Absolutely. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned obviously some of the nuances within that being, sticking to a diet, following a training plan, understanding progressive overload, but there's also accepting a loss as well. As we know, bodybuilding is incredibly subjective. And you could do everything right, but you may not place, or you may not win, or whatever the result ends up being. And you've got to be okay with that. Like the previous quote you said, take that as an opportunity to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, and it's a hard thing. I get like a lot of like angry DMs, which is weird. But I get messages from people like when I'll say like I'll put up a post and be like, bodybuilding as a whole is not necessarily for majority of people is not necessarily about winning.
Hmm.
Like and then it's about self-improvement. And then people are like, no, it's about winning. And it's like, look, the mid short and midterm goals are definitely to win,
Yep.
right? Like you don't go into a show not trying to win.
Of course.
But at the same time, like win or lose, the goal is never going to change. Get better.
Hmm.
And that's the underlying, and for majority of people that aren't competing for prize money that they're going to live off of, which is 99.9% of bodybuilders,
Yeah, that's
it's a
right.
hobby.
Mm.
right? Like you do it to get better. You don't do it to, if I don't win, I'm quitting, and those sort of things. So I think it's really important that athletes have that. They're going, all right, cool. Like if I don't place, my goal next time is to get the first call out,
Mm.
or, and have that as a short-term goal, and then, focus on getting better, because at the end of the day, that's what the fucking sport's about.
Yeah.
But I get some hate for it, which is weird. Um, it's never from the top athlete either, that funny
I was
thing.
going to say, yeah, that it'd be very interesting to know where that's coming from, but I guess, you can kind of
Yeah,
understand it at the same time.
yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, it's a really important uh thing to understand. And I think when you can go in constantly with that mentality, wins and losses are smaller than what people realize.
Mm,
I
absolutely.
think it's winning is short-lived. Like, you win a show, and there's another show in 8 weeks, and everyone's kind of gotten over it. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, cool. Let's just keep getting back, ride it for sure. But
Yeah,
at the same time, like, they're short, like they're just chapters of a book. I
yeah,
always say that. Like wins and losses are chapters of a book, and you got to
yeah,
move on to the next chapter. And the
absolutely.
whole book is you being your best, and trying to achieve your full potential.
Yep.
And I think that's what people need to focus on,
Yeah.
um, rather than, getting too high or too low over one show.
Mm, completely agree. Which is again another great segue because the next one I've grabbed is also about bodybuilding in terms of your quotes, and it's the five
They're all
things.
kind of similar. You work
Yeah,
that
they roll off each other, which is really good
out.
actually.
Yeah,
Five things to
yeah,
understand about competitive bodybuilding. So I'll briefly paraphrase it for you because you probably do remember these. We can't control winning shows, and we just spoke about that being
yep,
subjective. Getting properly peeled from coach's
yep,
point of view comes down to how well you can help a client enjoy the psychological side. Very true.
yep.
Athletes are made in the off season. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. If you're not stage lean a week out, no peak week's going to save you. Had that discussion plenty of times. And if you don't have a solid base of habits with training and diet for a long period of time, build those before considering competing. And that goes back to the previous slide we just discussed as well.
Mm.
There's a lot there to dissect, but at the same time, we've kind of touched on a lot of things. But um, bodybuilding is always going to be subjective. I don't see any way of that improving in any way, shape, or form when there's so many human beings involved in the sport from a judging perspective and running of shows and coaches and etc. So yeah, is there anything more you could elaborate on there in regards to when you thought of these particular points?
Yeah, look, they're probably things I've just written down randomly that I didn't make a singular post. And I was like,
Mhm.
these are five summary points that are pretty good. So
Yeah,
I'll put just like a quick list out. But I think one of the ones, a lot of those have just sort of come down to what we've just spoken about, where we've
yeah,
elaborated it, like, right? Like the lifestyles and habits thing. Like how many people are there that watch their friend do a show or see all the stuff on social media and be like, I
mm,
want to look like that. I'm
yep,
do it. And it's like, it's fucking way harder than you think. Like you're going to sacrifice a lot of things that you probably got you into the position you're in now that you enjoy doing, are going to have to be sacrificed to get that look. Like you can't just live your normal lifestyle that you've been living and then, you know, do the same stuff and then come back and be, look like they do on stage. Like it's not how it works. So
mm,
I think, a lot of people struggle with, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it as well, but you'll get a lot of people that'll turn around and be like, um, they'll be in prep and they'll be like, oh, look, I've got this event coming up and all my friends are there and I really want to drink. Is there a way we can do it? And it's like, no, you know what I mean? It's like you can't have the best of both worlds. Like if this is what you want to do, this is what you got to do. Like there's the time and place to do everything, but when the work comes time to get into the work, like you have to, if you want to be your best, you have to, there's going to be sacrifice.
absolutely,
Um,
100%.
and and I'll relay that back to basketball a lot, right? Like
Mm,
there's players that, miss their families' birthdays and Christmas because they're traveling on the road to play.
yep,
It's just a sacrifice you have to make, right? And it's like you can't have things. So, I think that's a good analogy that I like to use between the two. And it's like, you can, and a lot of those things is it's like you just go and don't drink.
yeah, yeah.
Like you still get to be there.
It's the
Like
experience,
it's not
right?
like
Yeah.
you're overseas or yeah, absolutely. So it's like those sort of things there where it's like, or it's like, oh, but my friends will give me a hard time. It's like, yeah, but like, have you ever like gone on the news or when your favorite sports team loses, seen how much they get all through there? Like these are things that, this is part of being an athlete. Like you got to deal with that stuff. Like if you want to be an elite athlete, this comes with the job.
It does. Absolutely.
Um, So yeah, so like I always try to again just pull things between the two because I think it's a very fresh perspective for athletes to have a look at. And clients may not like it at times, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's that one, and then I think what was one of the other
Peak week
ones?
one. It's not if you're not stage
Oh
leading
yeah,
week out. Yeah.
fucking hell, yeah, man. Like, yeah, you hear it right, like where it'll be like, oh, but once peak week's in and I deplete my water, then I'll be, everything will pop. It's like, first of all, we're not going to deplete
No, we're
water.
not.
This isn't the seven. And second of all, like, peak weeks don't do anything unless you're lean.
Yeah.
Like if you're not lean, keep dieting
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last
Use that
week.
extra week. That's right.
Yeah, just give yourself an extra week of dieting because it's not, the last week is not magical. The last week should just be like mentally lock in, try to remove as much stress as you possibly can, pull some carbohydrates in so that you can fill out a little bit. And then, it's not gonna, the athletes that peak weeks work really well with are generally ones that, nothing can really go wrong because they look really fucking good.
Yep.
Like and I always say this, and I had somebody, I'll tell you a funny story about this after, but like
Yep.
I put up a thing the other week about like no natural athlete is losing 4 or 5 places on a show because of a bad peak week.
Mm.
Like I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yep.
It would have to be so ridiculously close that it doesn't generally cost you. Like people put more emphasis on it than what they do. So like even the same sort of thing. It's like if you're lean a week out, a bad peak week isn't gonna necessarily change your position.
Mm.
Whereas maybe you can make arguments with enhanced athletes. But yeah, I had somebody attacking me on my Instagram about, even in a bad peak week can be the difference between first and last.
Mm.
Yeah, you haven't been to too many natural shows before because you know what I mean? That's not true. We know that's not true. So yeah, so I mean, it is one of those things where I think people could just get this thing in their head or because like the other thing, and I think probably what made me rant about that in the first place is like, like people will come third or fourth and then be like, oh, I messed up the peak.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
yeah, did you see the guys that beat you? Like,
Yeah.
they're a little
It's
better.
perspective.
Yeah, structurally better, more muscular, nicer shape, more conditioned. Like it's
No.
not, it wasn't the peak.
No.
Um, but yeah, so I think that one kind of like grinds my gears a little bit when I hear that. I feel like it's a bit of a cop out. Um,
Do you reckon the terminology of peak week, this mythology around it has grown to a point where people think it's just going to magically improve them significantly, and it's just been built up over years of
yeah,
Chinese whispers or whatever? Do you reckon that's got something to do with it? And we probably should just not call it anything.
I mean, just call it a diet break. Fucking hell. But yeah, it is. I think people in general want quick fixes.
Yeah, good point.
And I think, yeah, so I think like, just in general, it's always going to be that want for the quick fix. And I think, people that haven't done the work tend to,
Mm.
use that as an excuse because it's, it takes the blame off of them and puts it on the coach.
Yep.
And then for coaches, I think it's the same sort of thing where it's like, they might, oh, it was just a peak week messed up. And it's just taking the blame off of, maybe the process wasn't as good as it could have been, which is, everything's a learning experience. You'll know
Yep.
what to do to be better next time, which is what matters most. But yeah, look, I think I think I would like to think it's better now than it was 20 years ago.
Mm.
Because some of
Absolutely.
the shit that was happening 20 years ago was like, it's far better now, man. It's so much better now. Like trying to I've seen backstage at 10 years ago at ICN shows where people were like, completely dehydrated,
Mm.
but we need to get you a pump. So they essentially took pump powder and mixed it in with a few drips of water and turned it into like a paste, and then we're eating that because they couldn't get yeah. So like, and I've seen this before. So I do definitely think like I haven't seen something like that in a long time.
Yeah.
Completely dehydrating water because I think it makes them with the skin look thinner
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
bunch of stuff like that. So you don't see a lot of that anymore. So
No.
I think it's improving. But yeah, I definitely just think that people have they put a lot of merit on it when it's like, uh, if you're lean, peak weeks aren't gonna, the worst peak week could, if you don't do it right, it could make you like 1% worse.
Mm.
Whereas if you're not lean, it's not gonna make you, you know, 5% better
Yeah.
at all. Like
Yeah.
it's not gonna help you. So yeah, I think that's sort of my point to that, where
Yeah.
it was just
Fair
like
point.
it's
I've
no magic formula.
you could do almost a podcast on just bad peak weeks and old school methods. I remember
Oh
seeing
man.
one guy clearly dehydrated and used red wine as a means to get quote unquote vascular. So
Oh
you can
God.
imagine how that turned out.
The red wine and dark chocolate.
Yeah, yeah,
I had one person, I'll tell you a funny story. About 5, 6 years ago, I had one lady and she was like drinking red wine before, like maybe like an hour before she got on stage. And I'm like, why
right.
are you doing that? And then she's like, because I'm nervous as hell when it calms me down. And I'm like, that is the best argument I've ever heard for red wine before stage. Like, I was like, I can't argue that. Like,
Yeah, no.
if that's why you're doing it, go for it. Because that will work 100%.
Yeah, we'll calm you down.
It may not, yeah, it's not necessarily going to improve vascularity or do any of the things that a lot of people try to justify it with. But
Yep.
if you're open and honest about that, then I'm fucking power to you. Pour me a glass.
Oh dear. And then the final quote, which I think is a really good one, in regards to effort, and I really like this because I want to get your take on this. I'll read the whole thing. If you're aspiring to be an elite athlete, nobody should have to coach your effort. For majority of athletes, especially pushing for the highest level, your effort will be your only competitive advantage. But I think that take away the elite athlete perspective, I think effort in itself can be applied to just general lifestyle people too when they're trying to improve their body recomp, right? How
Yep.
many times or how often do you have a discussion? And it tends to become a little bit more challenging due to online coaching now, where you're not there face to face. But a lot of the time, individuals just don't know how far their training potential can go. Do you agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. It's a
100%.
fascinating beast.
Yeah, I think so that line I kind of modified it. There's an NBA player named Damian Lillard. I don't know if you've heard of him before. Very good professional American basketball player.
Mm,
He's about 6'1", which in NBA terms is very short.
short, yeah,
Probably not the most genetically gifted individual for basketball. One of the best players in the league,
yeah.
phenomenal. And that was actually I based that quote off something he said in his book, which was essentially like, I wasn't the biggest, I'm not the tallest, I'm not the fastest, but I knew that if I gave 100% effort, then I would have that over others.
Mm, very good, very true.
So that's where that was actually referenced. Again, another amazing takeaway from a different sport that you can
Mm,
apply into, bodybuilding, or general coaching. But yeah, I think it's true. I think the whole effort thing is, there's a big thing now about like work smarter, not harder. Like you see it with in business,
yep.
like in coaching business, right? Like everybody's doing everything they possibly can except the work. You know what I mean? It's like I'm going to do all the marketing. I want to work as little as possible, which I'm not going to argue. I get it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like you've got to add value to retain clients and get clients. Like
Why
you
are they
need to
paying
be
you? Yeah,
that,
that's cool.
you have to be valuable to the customer in order for them to continue to pay you.
Mm,
Same sort of thing, right? So like that's again, like you said, that applies to anything. Same sort of thing in business there. But I think in terms of like athletes, it's the same sort of thing. Like people look for everything that they can. Sometimes they try to what's that kid's story where they used to say like you can't go under it, you can't go over it, you got to go through it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that. I don't know what it was called, but I remember it.
Yeah. Same sort of thing, right? Like that always comes to mind.
Oh, we're good.
Sorry, I think we just had a technical difficulty there. So we just
We did.
quick 10-second break. So if it sounds interrupted a little bit, I apologize. But yeah, just the same thing with the that kid story where it's like you can't go under it, you can't go
Mm,
over it, you got to go through it. And it's that sort of situation, right? Where like a lot of people are trying to do their best to do as little as possible. But for a lot of athletes that aren't genetically gifted, which makes up 95% of people that have to, give that 100% effort every time just to be competitive. I think it's a really important sort of message and reminder for people to really push themselves because like at the end of the day, like if you don't have genetics on your side, if you don't have structure on your side, the way you're going to be your best is by outworking people.
mm,
Um, and not necessarily just like killing yourself to do it, but also, just outworking people smartly.
yep.
And it may take time, but that's what's going to get you to your best. Because I can tell you, there's a lot of athletes in the world that genetically very gifted that don't work as hard as some of the ones that aren't genetically gifted.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's just a really good reminder that, okay, cool. Like rather than say, oh, I can't do this because this person's genetics are way better or, whatever it might be. If all you have to work with is your own work ethic and effort, then use it, play to
Yep.
your strengths because everyone else is.
Be the hardest worker in the room. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, the basketball you just referenced, who was 6'1". What was Muggsy Bogues? Do you remember? Because he was under 6 foot, was he not?
Oh yeah. He was
Yeah,
like 5'6", 5'7".
yeah, and he made it as a
Yeah. I
professional player.
mean,
That's an
it's hard
exception to
though,
the
right?
rule, but
It's a different game nowadays.
yeah, of course, yeah.
I
But for that
think,
generation,
yeah. Oh, look, it's crazy. Like I think, there's it is a different game nowadays, but I think when Muggsy Bogues was playing, like it's absolutely insane.
mm,
But when Muggsy Bogues, like Michael Jordan was like 6'3", maybe.
mm,
Uh, and he could play the 2, 3, and 4 positions. So he could play sort of some of the taller guys as well. Nowadays, like the 2 and 3 guys, it's not uncommon to see the guys that are playing like the mid-size positions, like LeBron James, for example, at like 6'10". So they're getting
insane.
bigger. These
Yeah,
guys are getting bigger. So the game's changing. But yeah, Muggsy Bogues was insane.
yeah.
Like, yeah, he was 5'5", 5'6", very quick, very,
Unbelievable.
very
Yeah.
athletic.
Well, and but that leads to the point, right? Because he
Same
used his
situation
speed,
right
his
there.
agility, and his effort to get into
And
that
he
top
he
level.
learned his strengths and weaknesses, and he
Yeah.
tried to minimize putting himself in positions where height was going to be an issue, and
Yep.
he was very good at it. He was
Mm,
very, very good at it. So I think it's, similar, like when you look at the whole thing with Damian Lillard, right? Where he was saying it, he's not 6'6", 6'7", but he's given amazing effort towards working with his strengths.
yep.
And there are guys shorter than him in the league, but at the same time, uh he the level that he plays at with these bigger guys is
Mm,
is unbelievable. So I really like that quote, and I thought that that was something that I could take from basketball, and you can apply that anywhere, like
oh,
business,
yep.
all sorts of things. Like I was talking to somebody in a business mentor call about it, where I was like, look, like um, such and such is an IFBB pro, and they have massive traction and a following and yada yada, and it's like that's their strength. That's what they're going to use.
Mm,
You need to be smart and you need to be a good people person.
mm,
And you need to add as much value as you possibly can because that's going to be where your strength is.
yep.
And it's like, and it's a whole different concept, but it's not, like I take myself, for example, with that, right? Like I've never done bodybuilding in my life. Like I
Mm,
like training for body composition, but I've never tried to be a bodybuilder. Yet I can still work with elite athletes all over the world
mm,
in bodybuilding. I don't play professional basketball. I can still work with it because I know where my strengths are. So I'll work with, within my strengths to try to add to and complement the work that they're doing. So I think it's a really good like message for people to work out your strengths and just make sure nobody's working harder than you at
Yeah,
that. And then I think you can be successful.
absolutely, absolutely. Slight tangent? Do you feel like you mentioned obviously how tall the modern day professional basketballer is, and I can resonate with that too. Like the cricketers these days, the fast bowlers, they're of that similar height. Tennis
Mm.
players are also. Do you think that the professional athlete, due to high performance coaching, science, etc., are evolving into these just unique specimens? They're getting taller, they're getting stronger, they're getting bigger, they're getting faster, just due to the evolution of the human being in general.
Yes, I do. If you could train height, I would be all over that. But you can't. I would be the smartest man on earth at that. Trust me. Um, I would learn how to do that better than anyone. But I also think as well, right? Like I can't tell you from any other sport because I don't know cricket, and I'm sure you'll be able to help with this, or rugby, because I'm sure you'll be able to explain this to it better. But I can talk from basketball and I can talk from bodybuilding. In basketball, it used to be if you were a taller kid when you were younger,
Yep.
they would just train you with the skills to be a taller person.
Yep.
If you were shorter, they train you for the positions for shorter people.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, we know people grow to different heights.
Yes.
Nowadays, it's more often used that they train every single person to be a smaller basketball player,
Really?
regardless of height.
Mm.
Now, 'cause what ends up happening is if you take somebody that's like, you know, slightly taller than everyone else, but you're dealing with like genetical norms
Mm.
of people, and they learn how to play as a smaller player, they may grow to 6'6", 6'7". If you wanted them to stay as a local player, that would be the size of the biggest person.
Yeah, right.
You probably would cap their potential. If you train them as a smaller player and then they grow to 6'6" or 6'7", we have a much better chance of getting them overseas to play professionally because
Yeah,
they're going to
right.
have the skills of the smaller player. So
Mm.
back in the day, 15 years ago, that's how they would train everybody to be a smaller player.
Mm.
Sorry, they would train the bigger guys to be bigger players,
Yep.
smaller guys, smaller players. Now everybody is trained with the skills to dribble the ball up and down the court, passing, all those sort of things, shooting. And then when the guys that do get to 6'7", 6'8", they have the ability to play that smaller position. Um, and then if you're going to go to a high level professional league, that's the height you have to be.
Yeah.
So I think that, that's the way that basketball is taught from grassroots now, which I think is good because it's allowing Australia to have many, many, many more players playing internationally.
Absolutely.
Um, Bodybuilding, I think it's got some similarities in the way that like the evolution of how we train is getting so much better than it was 20 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, that like I'll use India, for example. That teenagers division,
Hmm.
when I was like 15 to 18, there wouldn't have been a human being on earth that would have looked remotely as good as the person that came last in that, right? So like I was like dumbfounded how amazing those people looked.
Yeah.
And I think people are starting younger.
Mm, they are.
And people are, and not necessarily bodybuilding, but they're getting into health and fitness and weight training. It's becoming more widely acceptable.
Mm.
Probably has something to do with social media and image and things like that, body image and stuff like that, that
Yep.
probably has something to do with it as well. But I think like people are just getting into it at a younger age, and they're getting better because they just have more time training.
Yep.
If you start at 25 and you've lived a pretty, a party lifestyle, some genetically good people probably would do quite well, but everybody else is starting behind the eight ball.
Mm.
Whereas, when you're getting people coming in and living a healthy lifestyle at, 14, 15, 16 and going in and lifting weights, by the time they turn 21, they got 7 years of training experience.
Yep.
So by the time they turn 30, they're 10 years in front of a lot of the athletes from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing higher quality. that mixed with like better training understanding and diet understanding and things like that. And we're just getting better athletes now.
Yep.
Like ICN now compared to 15 years ago
Mm,
is like, I've got pictures on my wall at the gym of people that won national titles 15 years ago
mm.
that, arguably don't belong on stage
Now,
in a local show.
yeah, I'm
And
exactly
it,
the same. Yeah,
yeah, so it's super cool to see like how, like you have a look at like what was it, like that Mangal guy. Like
yeah,
I literally have never seen an ICN like competitor look like him before.
yeah,
In classic physique, that was insane.
yeah.
The men's physique lineups, the men's fitness lineups, like you just don't see that. Like the evolution of the sport is just absolutely crazy, and it's credit to the Indians for that.
Mm.
Because they're gonna, I think when the world show's on, and we get like the best Indians, the best Australians, and we get some of the best Europeans. I think like India's gonna India's gonna show the
Oh, they're
world
going to turn
in
up.
men's bodybuilding. I think, yeah, and I don't
Yeah.
think people realize it. But yeah, like I think, it's a testament to all of that, where it's just, mix of things of people giving more effort from a younger age and just the evolution of sport and people are just getting better,
Mm.
which is good because that's what you need. It would be shit if everyone just stayed the same.
Yeah, yeah, true. Very good point. Very good point. Well, mate, we might wind it up there because it has surprisingly been over an hour.
Oh,
Talk about this shit all day, really.
yeah,
But
yeah, that's
we
my
might.
problem. We can go for hours.
That's all right. We might do a part two.
Yeah,
You got plenty of good quotes there. We can obviously draw some topics from. Um,
thousands of them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll finish up with personality questions. So everyone that comes on answers this one in regards to who would you have dinner with. So it's a bit more of an intake or a perspective from you for you. Dead or alive, fiction, non-fiction, male, female. Who'd you like to sit down with, have a good conversation with? There could be a couple. There could be a
I
couple people.
think now I'd go down with Donald Trump. I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, no, but like probably on a more serious note, like I think people, there's a person in the wrestling named Paul Heyman who's just an absolute brilliant business mind.
I know who he is. Yep.
Yeah, that I would sit there and chat to him for
Mm.
hours and hours and
Wise
hours.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the wise man. There you go. I think Jay-Z would be really cool to sit down with as well.
Yep.
Just because he had such a specific uh, genre of what he did in music, and then how he's managed to expand into many many different markets to become a billionaire. I think that would be a super fucking cool conversation.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I'd say from like a serious point of view, probably those guys. Um, I don't know, man. I have a bit of fun sitting down with you and Joey. Always and Dario
Over
and
a buttered
Tran.
chicken.
Yeah, some chicken 65, couple beers and some chicken 65. That's always a good conversation as
It
well.
is. It is.
Um,
Well, hopefully it won't be too long before we do it again.
what about you? Who would you sit down with? I'll throw
I,
out one.
I've had this thrown back at me a couple of times now, and each time I change my answer. I actually I recently listened to Trump on the Joe Rogan podcast, and
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. So I probably would say him. I don't know if that was before he got elected, so it was late last year that he
Yeah.
did that.
Be an interesting conversation.
It'd be fascinating because he goes on these tangents
Yeah.
and but weaves his way back. It's
Yeah.
really interesting the way he thinks. So yeah, I would definitely love to have, and it'd go for a long time too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it'd go
100%.
forever, but that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I
All
like
right.
it.
Well, I'll leave you to it. I'll let you get back on with your day. So thank you very much for your time. It is very much appreciated. Now, if people do want to follow along with your socials, because obviously, as I said multiple times, you do put up some really cool quotes and resonate a lot, and you do a lot of Q&As and answer a lot of questions as well, which is really good. Get
Yeah.
smashed with those,
Yeah.
clearly.
They're a circus sometimes. So far out.
Well,
Yeah.
the anonymous ones would bring out a lot more, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Well,
those are
yeah.
on Mondays, every Monday, and if you want some information slash comedy, definitely go jump on Monday. But my Richard_physique code.
Yep.
I try to do posts pretty much every day. Then the Q&As on Monday where I'll go through a whole bunch of stuff, which is always interesting. And then our work account, which is Physique code, it's straightforward on Instagram.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, it's good just to sit back and read them, like read the question and read your answer, and that's entertainment value as it is.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Always
that's awesome, man.
fun
Well,
to
thank you
read
very
that.
much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll have to do another one in the
Um,
not too distant future.
I'll see you in India.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.